So what do you think is going next for Sims?
That's
a big question.
Well, it kind of feels like as a bit of a review period underway, just for the new owners to kind of see what's what and where they think they need to go next. I mean, right up until I left, which is 10 months ago now, from a kind of secondary school point of view, to be fair, there weren't massive losses of customers, and people can look at that data online. It's quite easy to get hold of. I think I would be slightly worried about the not having a real good math solution. That would be probably one of my biggest worries, I think. But I think sticking to keeping your loyal customers and doing strategies around that, fixing stuff in Sims 7 always went down really, really well. Yeah. And so I think it will be possible to hang on to lots of customers. But whilst scurrying around, I guess in the background to see what to do about launching the sort of next generation. So I think gritting your teeth and coming up with a new master plan whilst trying to cling on to your customers, because I mean it is interesting, isn't it, how there's good customer loyalty, I think.
Yeah.
From Sims customers. And actually one of the things we do need to bear in mind is, whilst you and me and other EdTech commentators are kind of into this and on it every day and listening for what's happening and talking about it, actually that's not the case in the majority of schools.
No, far from it.
It's a thing that works in the background, and obviously with the pandemic as well, it just had so many other things to sort of think and worry about. Although on the other hand, in some cases, it's prompted people to need more online solutions for stuff. So it's a little bit of a double-edged sword in that respect. But I don't think it's, if you're a head teacher, it's not the thing you wake up worrying about every morning, in the same way that you and I do. So, I like to think that, things there'll be a new plan. And they'll hang on to the majority of those customers until such time as they can get the new solution out there. But I think it will have to come. I don't think you're going to be able to do that forever. It's every other provider's software as a service now, aren't they, in the cloud? And actually, so is nearly everything else. But I almost can't think of many that are not in the cloud. Any EdTech product at all.
No. I think you're right there. I think the only thing always I think I get concerned about is the longer it takes to get something into marketplace, the more frustrations you build up among your customer base, and you don't want the stream or the trickle to turn into the tap opening up wider and wider. As with yourself, completely independent of all the MISs and who wins or who loses. And there are some good ones out there. There are some ones which there's such a wide range, and they all have their own benefits, I think, to a large degree. But I think it's going to be interesting, and from a Sims perspective, I hope they get something out there sooner than later. That's all, I think.
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, a lot of it, we all, you, me, the other people who are interested, we talk a lot about cloud and not cloud and stuff like that. I'm not entirely sure the end users that bothered. What they really mean is the benefits cloud brings. So the obvious ones of no backups, no need for a server, but also I think associated with it are things like modern design, better user experience, and all those kind of things. Although we don't talk about that much, they naturally come with something that's bang up to date as opposed to something that's a few years old, don't they? And I think that's what people want. Accessibility, security, all those kind of things.
Oh, amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. It's really weird. It's a really strange thing that people focus so much on the things that don't add the value. So they use the tech rather than the value when they message. because you're absolutely right. You know, it's that whole sort of so what test. You know, it's cloud. So what? It gives you access, you know, anytime, anywhere. Okay, I'm more interested. You know, it gives you greater levels of security.
It is funny because actually just before I left Capita, and you get those moments, don't you, where even though you're kind of thinking about it every day, you still speak to someone and they surprise you. And you know, I remember talking to a primary school head teacher, and her prime concern, because actually she was going to not renew her contract for Sim 7, and I got dispatched along. I thought she was going to give me a long list of complaints, but actually she had one reason, and the reason was, I don't want to buy a new server, so I need something that's online. That was it. There was no other reason. Plain and simple. And you know, you get conversations like that are sort of a little bit surprising, and you think, well, somehow should have realized this, because I'm dealing with this every day, and it was that simple. So yeah, it's fascinating. It just reminds you need to keep talking to your customers.
It does. Yeah, even after COVID, I think there's you know, you already sort of hit the nail on the head. You know, we are constantly telling people, you know, go back out there now, because the priorities may have changed or the needs may have changed. You know, you've got to go back out and talk to your customer base all the time. Yeah, I fully agree. So going forward, which one, you know, if you're gonna be a betting man, so you don't, you know, I'm not trying to push you to a particular point a finger at any particular MIS, but if you're a betting man, where do you think the threats are? Where would you, if you're, which horses would you back?
Well, you can look at the figures and see who's doing well. So you've got Arbor and Bronco both doing really well. But a little bit of me thinks that it's not so much people were going to start looking for more of a good company rather than a good system. So, you know, in the course of just, you know, the last few, well, not just the last few months, but previously that, I've been trying to look outside of EdTech into what makes a successful company. EdTech companies, yeah, because obviously that's my prime concern, but also outside of it. And then you start to see sort of patterns and trends amongst companies, and you think, you know, and typically someone comes up with a good idea that they kind of turn into a mission because they've got a passion about whatever it is. Now that could be EdTech thing, as in, you know, parental engagement or something, but it could equally be a roasting coffee or selling special beer or something, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you kind of, you know, you look around at what else is out there, which is effectively kind of competitor analysis, and then you decide on who you're going to try and sell to and where your sweet spot is, which is essentially your kind of proposition. But I think that beyond that, you then start to think, actually, a good company will have all sorts of other things. They will, for example, have a really good pricing model. It's very unusual for companies, you know, generally not to have some sort of freemium option that's either a trial period or a bit of the software for free. And, you know, they then have so they've got a lot of options for you. You can sign up now, and now that whole thing around onboarding, being able to onboard really quickly and then follow that up with, well, almost a continuous kind of onboarding or kind of bleeds in once it's started. I guess you'd call it customer success. But that idea of, you know, driving your customers through the system in gentle bite-sized steps with, you know, positive experiences and value being added at every single step, you know, being really well integrated, because there is no system, and we talked about this a minute ago, you know, there's no system that stands alone. Every system you can buy needs to integrate with some other system. And you look outside of EdTech, of things like HubSpot, you know, they kind of, all these companies, they welcome integration with open arms. It's not a case of pushing people away and saying, no, we'll do everything for you. It's a case of, no, come on, the more the better. So, you know, being well integrated, forming, you know, value add partnerships with other companies. So all of these, you know, thought leadership, a community around the thing, you know, these are all the signs of really good software companies, be they EdTech or otherwise. So I just feel like, you know, maybe we're there already. we can slog it out on from an MIS perspective on a sort of feature by feature basis. But you and I have said this years ago, right? These days, getting a new feature is easy. For an engineer to build a new feature, it's easy. So there has to be more to it. And I think there might be a bit of a slide towards, I want to do business with a good company, assuming that the feature set's broadly similar, which probably is, and assuming that you've got good competitive pricing and pricing options, for different people. It then sort of becomes about, right, what's these guys like to do business? How are they going to help me to make this add value for me?
Yeah.
And there's all sorts of, there's all sorts of analogies, even if you think about energy companies, electricity is electricity, isn't it? How do you choose between them? Yeah, and you could say price, but they're probably pretty probably pretty keen on the pricing. Then becomes about customer service in that neck of the woods, doesn't it? And I think, and again, I think you and I have spoken about this before. You could almost see it shouldn't be about the tool. It should be about the first question I think that you should ask if you're an EdTech company going into a new school is, what's your development plan? It should always be your number one question, because I am going to help you execute on that development plan with my tool. And if you've got an issue with boys English or attendance or parental communication or whatever, this is how I'm going to help you, and it's going to be really easy.
Yeah,
because you're gonna sign up and get going in minutes, and you're going to start to get some value, and I'm going to guide you through that process until you've signed up to everything and you're using all my features and you're getting all the value that you theoretically could get. That's how I think. That's how I'd like to see it anyway. To see the future.
Totally.
And it's almost flipping things on its head in a way, because in the old days, I mean, when I started, and it was the same. It was the same with all the companies. Using the software was actually quite difficult. So you had to be trained to use the software and know which buttons to press. But actually, there should be much less of that these days. It's the 21st century. No one goes on courses to learn how to use the stuff we use every day. So it should be much more intuitive. And I think even for the specialist stuff, should even if you're an exams officer, for example, it still should be intuitive.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so therefore, it doesn't become about how to use it. It becomes how to get value out of it. And you can almost imagine a sort of a flipping of, rather than here's the product and here's the service that goes with it, which is actually teaching you how to use it. It should almost be, right, I'm going to offer you, and I think some of the service providers could do this, we're going to offer you a service to help you execute on your development plan. And by the way, these are the tools that are going to be used to help you do it. So if you could almost imagine a kind of service first EdTech economy. And by service, I don't mean the training, I mean the higher level, educational kind of partnerships, educational advisory type services, which is interesting because obviously some of the companies that are in the EdTech space offer those services, don't they? So, I mean, probably the one that kind of I think of off the top of my head is the key.
Yeah.
So this is not practical training. This is sitting down with learned advisors, if you like, to say, we've got experience of lots of schools. We've seen this problem before. This is what you need to do. This is what you need to do or try. But actually, this is the tool you need that's going to help you to do it. I feel like that would be a new era, a bit of a paradigm shift, but that would be the new era for me. It's let's start at the top. Let's start with the plan, and actually that could be the MAP plan, not the school plan.
I fully agree. I think, and you're right. It should encompass everything. They do want procurement or partners rather than software vendors. I think you're absolutely right. It comes back to getting rid of every single barrier to the point where you can get the value, as you said, or the outcome that you were after. These are the reasons why you want to buy this product or this solution, and because it's going to deliver this ultimate outcome. let me get there let me help you get there as quickly as I possibly can. Now that, and that means even the purchasing, even the buying has to be really low touch, because that's just flim flam. That's just administration. Installation is just administration. You want to get to the point where they're going, I'm using this system and I'm already getting these outcomes. Totally agree.
Yeah, and I don't want to, and I do feel like education is a little bit behind the curve in some respects. It was kind of, I was reading something recently, and it was 20 years ago when people were saying, every company, ultimately every company is going to be a software company, and what they mean is every company, not just tech companies, but every company is going to need to go digital and use software to succeed in their business. And if you just think of schools businesses as getting good outcomes for young people, and then you start thinking about the everyday examples. When you think about things like Spotify as an example, Spotify, it sort of feels like a tech company. It's actually a music streaming service, isn't it, at the end of the day? Loads of examples of those kind of companies that feel like they're tech companies, but actually they're not really. None of them. But they're using tech to really, really good effect, and they have great tech as well. And you think, school maths and school should be the same. And you think, and I'm sure there are lots of good examples of lots of schools and lots of people in schools who are using tech well in pockets. But actually, it's the honest truth that I myself, within the last 2 years, have been to schools where they still do paper registers. And that's no exaggeration whatsoever. And you think, I know most don't, and I'm picking an extreme example, but I do think it's a little bit indicative of where education is versus some of the top-notch businesses. Well, it's not even top-notch businesses, because I use Spotify as an example because everyone will know it. But I subscribe to this company that sends you coffee in a box. They're just the same. They've got equally good tech.
Yeah.
Signing up is easy. There's loads of different pricing plans. Communication is somehow just right. It's not irritating enough for me to unsubscribe. It's interesting enough for me to want to keep receiving it and engage with them. So I am, and you see it all over the place. But you don't see it so much in schools.
Yeah, and they're taking the pain away. Ultimately, your coffee is now coming to you, rather than you having to go out and try and identify where you're going to get that coffee from, or that type of coffee, or anything else. It comes to you, and you can pour yourself a nice cup of coffee. That's the outcome you want. You don't want to be scrambling around finding the right roast or even that sort of thing necessarily.
Yeah,
it's interesting. The only thing I'll say about Spotify, though, sometimes they serve up too much to you. Sometimes I want to search for things, but that's just me.
Yeah, I guess I like it because I'm lazy. So I'll put something specific on, and then I just leave it.
Yeah.
And you think, what? It's making good choices as far as I'm concerned. So
I agree. Most of the time, it really does understand your taste and will keep adapting your taste for sure.
And the convenience. I mean, I've got a rack of CDs. To be fair, they're not alphabetically listed or anything. That's sad, but it's quicker for me to get the album on Spotify than it is to look down the list. Yes. So how convenient is that?
Yeah, the CDs are now gone from our shelves.
No, you've got rid of them. Yeah, we pack them away, I think. But yeah, so I don't use them.
But fundamentally, coming back to the sort of.
But you don't get that in schools yet. I don't feel. I mean, you get the example of, and people could say, oh, that's an extreme example with people doing register on paper, and then some administrator having to spend all Friday putting it into, in this case, Sims, because it needs to be there for the census return. But I've also spoken within weeks to a guy he was a lovely guy, and he didn't mean anything by this. He was trying to be helpful, actually, by talking to me. But he was saying, IT, when do we just leave that to the IT department? But I think if you're a manager in a school or a MAT, you should be looking for solutions to help you do help you do the job better.
Totally agree. And I think there's well, some of the issue is actually from both sides. I think there's an element where educators don't know what they should be pushing for, so they're not being curious enough. And I think from the other side, I think the EdTech companies are sort of going, well, the the educators aren't asking for it, so do you know what, it's definitely a little bit cheaper for us, but also we can continue to do what we're doing, and we're still going to be reasonably successful from that. So I think there's almost an element where neither are being curious enough about what each other wants or what they could have. And so it almost becomes a bit of a stalemate, where I think actually they both need to be more curious and say, actually, I think the educators should say, do you know what, I want this as an outcome. Tell me how you're going to do it.
Yeah, I completely agree. It's very sort of two-sided, but both need to be more demanding.
Yeah.
And in some ways it's ironic, isn't it, that, by and large, schools are lovely customers.
Amazing.
The kind, gentle people. They want to be helpful. They don't want to be offensive. But in a slightly ironic twist, being so nice can mean you're not as demanding. Quite often. In fact, again, this is, I mean, it's pockets of experience that I'm giving you as examples, but the experience obviously goes back 20 years. But even as recent as yesterday, you're looking at a person struggling to use a piece of software and actually thinking the lady was apologizing for not being able to do it, rather than saying, actually, this should be easier.
Yeah.
And that's what she should have been doing, really. She should have been saying, this should be easier to use. Everything else I use is easy outside of this world. But actually, I'm going to struggle through it, and I'm going to be really apologetic that it's not obvious what to do. But it should be obvious what to do. And you're right, it's both sides. It's both sides, definitely.
And I think probably in some ways with the Sims, the slowness of the change is probably some part of that is to do with people's expectations. You sort of go, well, I'm used to this Sims. I know what I can get out of it, so I'll stick with it, rather than going, actually, I do want something more intuitive. Because UI and UX has moved on. We all know that. So rather than pushing for the next big thing, as it were, they're sort of going, well, no, I'll make do. And I think there's an element of that for sure.
Yeah, a bit of the devil you know.
Yeah.
But actually, all of these should all be challenges to the companies.
Yeah.
They should be challenging themselves, to make things easier for their customers. And obviously, if they did that well, then obviously they'd get steel on their competitors, wouldn't they? So, we should never be kind of complacent with the status quo.